Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, November 23rd. I'm your host for today's program, and today we do an interview about Harvest Day tomorrow with an educator by the name of Denise Sweet. Welcome to the Native News Update at IndianCountryTV.com, Denise Sweet. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Paul. It's nice to see you again.
Yes, this is the day before this famous so-called Thanksgiving Day, and I thought we'd just give you a ring, chat a little bit about some of the ideas out there, because if you go to Facebook and other places, you've got all kinds of stuff going on about this day tomorrow, ups and downs, arguments about history, poetic justice, and all that. Give me a little bit of capsulization about what your impression is about what's going to happen on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, as you know, I'm an educator, and I had taught for First Nation studies in the UW system. So I have a lot of material. And my perspective is revisionist history, revising history so that we have a more accurate picture from a number of perspectives. Before, American history was written by the winners or the people who were the conquerors. And now we realize that some of the misinformation presented in American history classrooms does a disservice to our students. They deserve, and they are mature enough to understand American history in its entirety. So there's that. Furthermore, I think that the status of Native people has grown to a greater visibility on the national stage. And we have functioned as citizens of this great country for the longest time, except that we weren't actually citizens until the mid 20th century. Maybe 1972, it was affirmed that our citizenship status was real and legitimate.
Slow evolution from 1924, but realistically up until the 70s before the voting rights and everything else came with it in some parts of the country.
Exactly. Along with it had to do with our status as citizens as we served in all of the wars from the beginning to the current status of the conflicts that the United States finds itself in. In addition, the Religious Freedom Act of the 70s, was it?
Yes. Yep.
We realize that by sheer perseverance and stubbornness, we continued to maintain religious freedom even when it wasn't sanctioned by the United States government. So we have persisted. I think our greatest talent as a race of people was the fact that we have resisted assimilation, we have resisted acculturation, and we have resisted invisibility.
Yes. Let's oversimplify this a little bit. For the last 200 years, basically, the white guys got to write history. Very
Yes.
few females, very few people of any other race. And the question I would say is, if you went to a fourth or fifth grade in any school, Wisconsin, Missouri, California, and did a survey and said, who brought the food to the first Thanksgiving, what kind of a response would we get?
There is the idea that Native people are of the status of being innocent, naive, and unable to function and survive without modern technology and the knowledge brought to us by the settlers or the invaders or the conquerors. So I think young people are have this vision of Native people as being very simple and illiterate and not really wise enough and savvy enough to take care of themselves. This is the impression, or this is the sort of the campaign by the Great White Father and his little children of the forest, right?
Right.
So they learned from the Great White Father that we have to take care of Indian people. We have to feed them, we have to clothe them, we have to educate them in the ways of the white man. Otherwise, they won't survive. Their
Right.
numbers are diminishing.
In other words, they would have gone hungry
Yes.
if the colonizers or the Pilgrims hadn't brought all this wonderful food to feast and shared it to them so the Indians wouldn't have to go hungry. Poor guys, poor
Yes.
people.
Yes, exactly. I often think about, the idea of Columbus discovering America, and I want to get this in. Paul, we know that Columbus did not bring his wife, or even if he had a wife, on the great voyage. Because if he had, he wouldn't have never discovered America and its people because she would have made him ask for directions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What are you going to be doing tomorrow? What are you going to be doing instead of this kind of mind thought about Thanksgiving and so how do you celebrate it and how does that relate to perhaps what originally happened?
Well, for me, I like to observe this period of time in a quiet, understated fashion. In times past, my son, Vaughn, and I would fast for the day, and then we would break fast at the end of the day with very simple foods. Right? Tomorrow, I'm going to reflect upon all of the gifts that have been brought to me through my family, through my children. I will get together with my family. My family is involved with hunting, deer season, and that sort of thing. I'm going to be planning a move back to the Green Bay, Oneida area. So I'm very excited about that. I'll be busy. It will be just another day to me. I observe harvest in a ceremonial fashion, and it doesn't occur on the third Thursday of November. But I think it's very important that we are gracious, that we extend ourselves in a humble way to be thankful. I absolutely agree that we ought to be thankful for everything that comes into our lives, right down to the basic element of the food of the harvest season.
Corn, beans, and squash.
The three
Um,
sisters, yes.
Turkeys, and I remember about 20 years ago seeing my first wild turkey as it was introduced into northern Wisconsin. And nowadays you can actually have to be stopped on some back road highways while the flocks go running by in front of you. Are you going to get too many? Have you come across wild turkey yet?
Absolutely, and you're right too. They're almost as plentiful as Canadian geese now. They'll go tromping across the road, and you do have to stop for them, and that's perfectly fine. They're an odd looking bird, aren't they?
They certainly are. They don't look anything like the butterball that with the little red thing that pops out and all that. It doesn't. None of them come with that, so we're not quite sure what we should do with them. The idea of Indian giving, doesn't this stuff get turned around? I mean, again, we talked about how elementary kids are thinking that somehow the Pilgrims brought the food for the poor Indians. Indian giving has this real negative connotation that somehow you give something and you take it back when it's totally opposite. Tell us what you know about Indian giving from the tribal community view.
Right. The idea of Indian giving in predominant culture is not giving, but taking. Making a promise to extend yourself or to give other people and then taking it back. And that is absolutely counterintuitive to Indian people. In fact, to a fault, we're giving, aren't we? I was at on the Menominee Reservation last weekend, and a couple of people held a giveaway and a feast. They were making some changes in their life, and they gave everything away. They gave everything of value that they held for years and years and gave it all away. The notion and tradition of giveaways, of potlatch, the anthropologists call them a redistribution of material wealth, but it's much more than that. It is, in a way, establishing yourself in spiritual wealth, to give away everything. One man said to me, the richest man in the village is the man who has nothing. He has the gifts of friendship, and he extends himself, gives everything away to maintain those relationships. So I think that when we think about Indian givers, we're mistaken to think that we recognize the sincerity and the tangible wealth in a promise, in a relationship, and in a spiritual worldview that gives to us again and again and again.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what all the Republicans will be doing tomorrow because isn't Thanksgiving kind of like a socialistic thing where people that have food share it to other people who don't?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it is the one day of the year that people look around to others who are in need and try to compensate for the rest of the 364 years when we think that that has nothing to do with us. When I lived in Green Bay and when I first started to be involved with the United Amerindian Center, I would go
Right.
to homeless shelters and help serve the Thanksgiving feast. And that made me feel a little bit better, but I realized that I was being like other people who only are conscious of the people who are needful in our community, in our society, when we should be addressing that every day. That should be a very important policy in America, taking care of the homeless, those people who don't eat every day. Most of the children in our society, I would say, I don't know the exact figures, but many of our children only eat one solid meal at home
Right.
a day.
The horn of plenty and volunteerism, getting out there and feed some of the people who are less fortunate. I have one last question. We're almost out of time today. What relationship do the Packers and Lions have to do with Thanksgiving?
Are you serious, Paul?
Oh, well, I hear there's a game going on and everyone's focused on it.
Well, it's to me, football is very much like the American political system. In the sort of the ruckus that takes place between the senators and the representatives, the different parties, they get together. They just like football players. They get together, have a meeting, they break apart. Then they go in and tackle one another and bring each other to the ground, and then they have another meeting. So it plays over and over again on the world stage. I think football is wonderful. I am a Packer fan, but it gets a little distorted once in a while in terms of our allegiance to, I don't know, pride in being American.
I understand that. I want to thank you for joining with us. I saw a sign just the other day. It said something like this. It said, warning, please do not feed the pilgrims. They'll never leave. You have a happy harvest day, okay? And say hi to all your friends and relatives and enjoy the meal. Thanks for joining with us today.
See you later, Paul.
And we want to thank DJ Wheeler for having that t-shirt show up at IndianCountryTV.com. Look forward to a 43-minute interview with Yakima businessman Delbert Wheeler that's coming up here on IndianCountryTV.com. And you have a nice day. We're going to take the day off for a harvest feast tomorrow. And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Miigwech for joining with us. Come back again soon.